Developing this morning, sources tell CNN that President Trump is considering a possible pardon for his first national security advisor, Michael Flynn. Also, ultimately, several others in the orbit as well. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff. He is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for being with us. As you know well, Michael Flynn pleaded guilty, then tried to withdraw those guilty pleas. He cooperated with the Mueller investigation, then uncooperated. Now CNN's reporting is the president is considering pardoning him, and soon. What message would that send?
Well, it would send a message that, at least as far as President Trump is concerned, if you lie on his behalf, if you cover up for him, he will reward you. He will protect you, but only if he thinks it's in his interest. There are others that lied for him that he's not going to extend that kind of service to. But it just, frankly, reflects so ill on our democracy, on the United States. I imagine what people around the world think when we have a president who's acting like an organized crime figure. But this is who Donald Trump is. It's who he was on the way into the presidency. It will be exactly who he is on his last days of the presidency. You
don't dispute that is the absolute power and authority to pardon, though, do you?
Well, it's not absolute. With respect to Mike Flynn, he may have the power to provide a pardon, assuming that it's not on the basis of some illicit quid pro quo. But nonetheless, he can't pardon himself, in my view, without it with a legal effect. He can try, but I don't think it would hold up in court if ultimately there was a case brought against him. And there are other limitations on what he can do with the pardon power, but it is very broad and subject to abuse, as he has demonstrated.
I want to play some sound from President-elect Joe Biden from an interview last night where he's asked about when President Trump will be former President Trump and what then President Biden will do or advise his Justice Department to do in regards to Donald Trump. So listen.
I will not do what this president does and use the Justice Department as my vehicle to insist that something happened. There are a number of investigations that I've read about that are at a state level. There's nothing at all I can or cannot do about that. But I'm focused on getting the American public back at a place where they have some certainty, some surety, some knowledge that they can make it.
How do you feel about that, Mr. Chairman? Do you think, or what federal investigations do you think should or shouldn't continue involving President Trump?
Well, I think the president-elect is saying exactly what he should, which is, number one, he's not going to be like Donald Trump. He's not going to use the Justice Department to persecute his enemies, to make up things about his enemies, to suggest illegality by his enemies. But number two, he's, I think, communicating he's not going to be involved in those decisions. He's going to leave that to the career professionals at the Justice Department. He will restore the independence of the Justice Department that it enjoyed since Watergate as a result of Watergate reforms and norms that were put in place. But he's also saying, look, I can't speak to the priorities of others like the state of New York or the county district attorney's office in New York. I can tell you my priority is to get our people back on their feet, to help feed families, to help end this pandemic. So I think he's spot on with his message, both about the Justice Department and about his priorities.
What do you think? Do you think there should be federal investigations of Donald Trump once he leaves office?
I think that the Justice Department will have to look at those issues on a case-by-case basis, looking at the severity of any allegation, but also the importance of the country in terms of healing and moving forward. I don't envy the difficulty of those decisions, but I don't think you can speak with great generality about it. I think it will have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
So sometime in the next 55 or 56 days, there will be an open Senate seat in the state of California because Kamala Harris, who is the vice president-elect, will become vice president. So if California Governor Gavin Newsom calls you, the phone rings, you pick up, and Governor Newsom says, Congressman Schiff, I would like you to be senator. What's your answer?
My answer, well, let me just say that you'd be hard-pressed to find any member of the House who wouldn't be happy to get that call and doesn't view themselves when they look in the mirror as a potential senator. But I think the governor's got a lot of very difficult choices ahead of him, and this is one of them. I don't envy it sincerely because of the pressure he's under. I don't want to add to that in any way, and I'm confident he'll make a great decision.
But was that the first part was a yes? I'm like all or many of the members of Congress who look at themselves as possible senators. You wouldn't say no.
That was a diplomatic avoidance of your question.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. Hey, listen.
Maybe not a very successful one, but an attempt anyway.
You have done a lot of thinking on the Constitution, and you certainly had to during the impeachment process when you were the lead manager there, in having to do with how the Constitution wrote about impeachment. I'm now curious about how the Constitution deals with elections and the Electoral College and the whole process, because one thing that's clear is the founders didn't anticipate anything like what we have now. Just the system is so much different than they wrote about. There's no constitutional requirement for elections at all for president. So given what we have just seen with a sitting president trying to overturn Democratic results in some states, what reforms need to happen? I mean, what can we do so we don't have to depend on one state canvasser in Michigan to make sure that election results aren't thrown out?
Well, it's a good question. I think a few things really leap to mind. Number one, we need a clear standard for ascertainment so that you don't have some relatively unknown, obscure official at the General Services Agency, GSA, making that decision about whether a transition can go forward. I also think that, as we studied all the potential contingencies going into the election, we discovered that the Electoral College Act, which interprets and implements some of those processes, is really poorly written and very confusing. And so there, I think, needs to be a lot of thought to rewriting that law. But one kind of overriding consideration, John, and this is similar to what you raised in terms of the impeachment. Yes, there are difficulties, ambiguities, problems in the constitutional language on this subject. But even the best language doesn't protect us, whether it's about impeachment or the Electoral College, if the people implementing that language don't have the spirit in which it was written. And here, if GOP electors are going to ignore their legal and constitutional duty and refuse to certify an election where there's no doubt about the outcome merely because they're asked by the president on the basis of party, then the system isn't going to work. There are always going to be ways to work around what the law says if people are not acting in good faith.
Yeah.
And so that I think is the broader challenge these days.
Mr. Chairman, thanks so much for being with us. We do appreciate your time and your attempts at diplomacy. Thank you.